Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joyce Purdue Smith, and I serve as the board chair of the Fairview E.S. Brown Heritage Corporation. This is our third year participating in Super Museum Sunday, and we're awfully glad to be here in a virtual way. I am honored to speak with you today about the highlights of the Fairview School's restoration journey. This year, by using a virtual platform, we have the perks of being able to not only reach a larger audience, but we can directly engage with you. Throughout the conversation today, please feel free to engage our panelists with questions that you may have. You may ask those questions live or submit them through the chat feature. Also, after the session today, you can visit our website and again, see the video again through YouTube, the YouTube channel. So let's begin. I'd like to first share a bit of information about the early beginnings of the Fairview project back in 2009, and then introduce you to our panelists. In 2009, I returned to the Cave Spring, Rome area to support my parents. In so doing, I was prodded to document my dad's, Eugene Purdue Sr.'s professional career. I had oftentimes wondered, how did he manage to grow up in one of the most impoverished areas of Floyd County, yet graduate from the prestigious African American College, Tuskegee Institute, and then land the position as the fourth principal of the Fairview School, which we now know to be a Rosenwald School. Therein began my research of his professional career, and with the help of local alumni and friends in the community, the Fairview School, a Rosenwald School and national treasure, was rediscovered after 60 years of abandonment and sitting beneath a sea of kudzu. This find shocked the entire Floyd County community, and everyone scurried to see this school underneath the kudzu for 60 years, for which no one knew about, and it was really in plain view, still within the city limits of Cave Spring. It was at this point that I became intrigued with the question of how to save the school and why would this old abandoned campus matter now? We have panelists here to discuss these questions that I have and those who've encouraged me. Over the past 12 years, the question has been, why does this old place still matter? Today, we're pleased to have a very distinct panel to further shed light on the bits and pieces of Georgia's history, the lost history. Our panelists include Jeanne Cyriaque, Jamil Zainaldin, Glenda Faye Allen, and Joseph Smith. Jeanne Cyriaque, let me introduce her. We'll hear from Jeanne, former chairman of the board of the Georgia Humanities Council and a specialist in historic preservation and an acclaimed Rosenwald scholar, speak on the impeccable career in Georgia's African American history and the Rosenwald Initiative. I met Jeanne through a mutual friend just by happenstance during a casual conversation. I was advised to call Jeanne because she was engaged in saving African American projects around the state. That first conversation with Jeanne lasted hours as she and I realized that the very school that she was looking for in Cave Spring was the very school that we had just found and discovered. I can't tell you what a moment that was. And from that time forward, she's been a trusted mentor to the Fairview School. Next up will be Jamil Zainaldin, also on panel today, who is the former president emeritus of the Georgia Humanities Council. Before accepting a position with the Georgia Humanities Council, he was nationally known and worked for the Federation of Humanities Councils. Jamil has co-authored a book about Southern philanthropy with Martin Lafelt and led the effort to complete Georgia's new online encyclopedia. Well, Jamil and I met through Jeanne, and she assured me that Jamil was just the keynote speaker for our first gala in 2014, which resulted in a sellout crowd. Jamil, in his genteel way, has been a valiant mentor, expressing the significance of the humanitarian importance of our project. He has introduced the project within the spirit of people who could be of value. This led to recognition from Governor Deal, who awarded us a 2015 Governor's Award for the Arts and Humanities. And until this day, he's still a great mentor and always available at the other end of the phone to share great advice. And then there's Glenda Faye Allen. The finalist is one of my best friends. She was since the second grade. We both graduated from E.S. Brown Elementary, which was an equalization school. She graduated from West Georgia College, has served as president of the prestigious AKA sorority in the area, and is a beloved educator from Rome City Schools. Faye has a wealth of experience in tutoring young minds and has an inspirational story of her own to tell. So let's talk about the Fairview School. Let's talk about an historical and cultural perspective of the Fairview School. And let's let these participants share their story. So let's hear from our panelists now, who will give their perspective about the value of the Fairview School, its importance, and why it matters. Each panelist will have approximately 5 minutes to share their expertise and insights. Questions from the audience are encouraged. So Jeanne, speak on the significance of Black history, sites in Georgia, your findings, and your opinion of why the Fairview School matters from a historical perspective.
Thank you, Joyce. Good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to talk to you today about the importance of this Fairview campus. I'm a preservationist, I'm also a historian, and I'm a researcher. So this speaks to why I got involved in this project from the beginning. I was in search of Georgia's Rosenwald schools during my time with the African American Program Coordinator position with the state of Georgia. I had absolutely no experience in preservation at the time, but I had a lot of other experiences. So I became very interested in what happened to Georgia's 243 Rosenwald schools. And it led me on a journey that I'm still a participant in today. Basically, I was concerned about, well, if we only had 243 schools, why was it so difficult for me to find these buildings? And my quest took me lots of places, and I met various people, including Joyce Smith. But anyhow, I was taken back by this story. So I began to just search with my interns at the time for these schools whenever we were out on any kind of African American assignment. And I'd like to talk about it a little bit in the context of a book that was just recently produced by the University of Georgia Press. It's called A Better Life for Their Children. And I think the topic of this book, the title, really speaks to why I got involved in this. African Americans after enslavement, as we know, really sought out education, religion, and a number of social practices. But education was the key. And so in a little community like Cave Spring, it became a rural community that spoke to a story that was of national significance. So I met a photographer along my journey. Actually, I met him much later than I met Joyce Smith. His name is Andrew Filer. And Andrew and I, too, when we first met each other, we were like the yin and the yang. I took him to places around Georgia. I said, Andrew, I think this is the Rosenwald School. But he being an artist, of course, he was more concerned with how the buildings looked, how this represented a story that he was very excited about as well, because he is Jewish and a Southerner. So I, being an African American woman, and Andrew, we entered this partnership. And so his book speaks to places like the Fairview School. It was produced by the University of Georgia Press, and it really talks about this in a much broader context of nearly 5,000 schools that existed in the United States of America, in all 15 states that we now know as the Deep South, and as far west as Arkansas and Texas. So Cave Spring is important to me from an historic preservation place because this place matters, this school matters, this community matters, and so does this town. It's not a usual preservation story because oftentimes preservationists, we get a little bit on everybody's nerves when we talk about what's significant historically. We tend to look at the built environment first. But I too am very interested in not only the built environment, but the broader story. And that is the power of this Fairview connection. Also, that is the power of Andrew's book, because he captured over 100 Rosenwald schools in their various states of preservation. Some indeed are really gigantic representations of where we are today in reusing these campuses, because that's what Fairview is. It's a campus. It's not just one building, it's a series of buildings. Joe Smith will speak to that more, but that's how I got involved with Fairview, and that's why I support it today. I encourage everyone to get a copy of this book because it really speaks to this broader story. And if you can't get the book, it's going to soon be an exhibit right in Atlanta. In the next month or so, there will be an exhibit of Andrew Filer's wonderful photographs. And I am delighted that I was part of a virtual discussion of this a month ago. And over 500 people attended this. I know that Joyce Smith was there. We've talked about it. I hear her laughing in the background. But it was really a conversation. And I think that this type of story really does stimulate a conversation that is relevant not only to historians, preservationists, but also to young people, because they now go to schools like the old Brown Elementary School. Some of them even go to schools today that are fully integrated. Mm-hmm. And we need to address this with our young people. I'm sure Faye will speak to this in her part. So I've talked long enough. I encourage everyone to get a better life for their children. And if you can't get the book, it's available on Amazon and other sources. But if you're in the Atlanta area, I know it's going to be at the Atlanta Center for Civil Rights for most of next year. So I encourage all of you to do it. I probably have overdone my 5 minutes. So,
Jeanne, just let me ask you one question. Do
yes.
you know if there's any intention or process already in place for the Rosenwald story to be incorporated into the regular educational curriculums offered around the state? Do you know if anybody has started that initiative?
I do not know if it has really generated that type of interest as far as curriculum goes. But then too, there are efforts that I'm sure Jamil will speak to. I'll just comment on how it's used in a humanities setting, both as topics, for example, for an annual event that the humanities does, National History Day, which just happened. But in the past, there have been Rosenwald schools discussed as projects by these students. And I think that is an exceptional strategy. I also know that at least one Rosenwald book has already been published that was for a very young audience, elementary school. So I hope that this kind of discussion can generate a building block type of approach here, where educators become interested in it when they hear about it. Well, how can I incorporate this into my agenda for schools? One such epiphany I had while I was doing research, I went to a campus once and spoke to these fourth graders. And I tell you, I got my schooling that day.
Oh, okay. That was good.
Because these kids, they asked me questions. I was truly stumped. They said, well, we know people in our community. They say this wasn't the Rosenwald School. This is what you call a equalization school, Miss Cyriaque. I was like, well, okay.
Okay. So they're informed. They're informed.
Yeah, and they went on with the big project. That's a result of it. I was quite impressed. So I think it has great potential, to answer your question, for today's students, because that particular school, I'm telling you, was 90% white.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And
so
this
they knew,
one
they were informed.
project stimulated a number of discussions, including a marker by the Georgia Historical Society.
Yep. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. And actually, that's one of the things that we plan to do at the Fairview School, is to offer the same type information about the Rosenwald initiative, so that kids can begin, garnering, the things that happened back during that day when it was not as easy as it is now. So thank you so much, Jeanne. Thank you so much. Glenda Faye, my dear friend of many years.
All right, now let's not tell how old we are.
Sure. Would you share with us how your experience at E.S. Brown, which was actually the equalization school that preceded Fairview, impacted your professional career and your community involvement?
Sure, I will be glad to. Miss Josie Sams, Miss Marguerite Parrish, Miss Annie Glenn, Miss Ola Howard, Miss Mildred Davis, Mr. Albert Culver. Now, if you attended E.S. Brown, then you cannot help but to smile whenever you hear those names. The teachers at E.S. Brown were more than just teachers. They were also our counselors. They were our parents. They were our minister. And most important of all, they loved us. My teachers at E.S. Brown inspired me to become a teacher. We had our teachers who encouraged us and motivated us every single day. And they always told us, always believe in yourself and don't ever give up. Now, after leaving E.S. Brown, I found those things to be so very true. But what a lot of people didn't have that I had was that I knew I could always go back to my teachers if I needed help. Now, after I left E.S. Brown, I went on and I became the first one in my family to go to college. I taught for 32 years Rome City Schools. And to me, that was the most amazing 32 years. I had so many students who was just like I was when I was growing up in Cave Spring. They didn't have very much, but they had teachers who cared about them. Now, I'm proud to say I have a daughter who followed her mom's footsteps and came into education after she assured me in high school that she would never be a teacher. Um, my daughter, my daughter Jennifer has been teaching for 24 years. She was recently promoted to the secondary director of curriculum and instruction for Rome City Schools after serving as a principal at Rome Transitional Academy for 14 years. So whenever I think about E.S. Brown, I always smile. I always think about our recess time joys.
Yes.
I always think about May Day. And I just wish that so many of our students now would have had a chance to enjoy what we did by going to E.S. Brown.
That is so true, Faye. That is so true. And in fact, what you just said brought to mind the Fairview slogan. The Fairview slogan adopted by, I think, over the Fairview School itself and handed down to E.S. Brown. And it was remember, good, better, best. I will not let it rest until my good is better and my better
is best. Yes, yes.
I can understand. Thank you so much for that, Faye.
Thank you.
Any questions of her from the panel?
I have one, Faye.
Yes.
Do you recall, you talked a little bit about your 30-year career in the Rome City Schools.
Yes.
And I can relate to that as well. Okay. So surely you know about Maine High School.
Well, no, Joyce and I were talking about that recently. We knew about Maine High, but we didn't make it to Maine High School. Oh, we were so disappointed. Broke our hearts.
I wonder why. You did. I think it's because you're too young.
No, that's when they did the schools fully became integrated and they closed down E.S. Brown.
That's what I was alluding to.
Look, that was, oh my God. I tell you, hey, we wanted to go to Maine High.
But things changed. But we did quite well at the integrated school in Cave Spring, if you remember, Faye.
We did. We made a lot of friends, and hey, we had each other, so we survived.
Absolutely.
And you did quite well. What, Faye? Another question I have. You talked a little bit about the influence that you had on your own daughter.
Oh,
and I think that's wonderful. that she might have said to you that, oh no, I'll never be a teacher.
Yes, she would tell me that every summer. She would come home from college. I said, Jennifer, you're going to be a teacher? No, ma'am. No, ma'am. And then I think she was a sophomore. She had to take an education class, and she fell in love with education. Secondary education now, not elementary, but secondary. I was an elementary school teacher. So, I love the little bitty folks, but my Jennifer, she wanted the big ones. So I'm so proud that she did become a teacher. Make me a proud mama.
Well, don't feel bad, because I have two sisters that taught school. And numerous nieces. And my mother, too, who has passed on, she used to ask me, why on earth weren't you not a teacher?
Oh,
Wow.
And I would say probably, Mom, I don't know. I want to be a sociologist.
if we would only listen.
You know, but she probably just laughed, just like you guys did. Okay.
It's fun. It's fun.
But
Uh,
anyhow, one of the greatest mentors I had was Dr. Susie Wheeler.
uh,
And she was what was called a genes teacher.
correct. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this was a whole different area of Rosenwald schools. In other words, she too became a great educator. And when I first met Dr. Susie Wheeler at the Noble Hill School,
Cool. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I probably said to her, Dr. Wheeler, how did you save this building?
Mm-hmm.
And she told me that story. And she also told me, she said, you are really something else, Miss Cyriaque, to even come up here talking about that.
Right.
You're from the State Historic Preservation Office. So then I probably amazed her too when I said, well, I just knew it was 3 schools when I first got started. So I thought I'd come up here to see you. And so anyhow, she told me to be more concerned about not the restored buildings, but finding those teachers, those alumni, those stories. And she will forever be my mentor. And her school is in Andrew Filer's book as well.
Right. And if I might add, the Noble Hill School has been a great sister brother school to us in terms of formulating and putting together our restoration efforts. So thank you so much, Faith, for that summary of the importance of your educational experiences at E.S. Brown. And last up, we have our Jamil. Jamil, would you please explain to us a few things, one of which is, what is the humanitarian viewpoint of why the effort to preserve African American sites matter?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted that Georgia Historical Society is involved in making this video possible, because Georgia Historical Society has a commitment to keeping the stories that Faye and Jeanne and you are telling about the Rosenwald schools. And I hope that this involvement in this Super Museum Sunday will lead to further involvement of Georgia Historical Society in promoting the vision that we're here to talk about for the Fairview School today. What I thought I would just say very quickly, because I have been very moved by Faye, by Jeanne, and Joyce, by your testimonials. And in fact, what I would say is, if you want to know what the Fairview School is about, the copy of what the 3 of you just said says it all.
Oh.
It is about creating responsible citizens in our community, citizens with a memory, citizens who value human learning as one of the ways that we can learn to live together. If I were to have a motto for what I'm learning from Rosenwald School movement, but also from Fairview Brown, the motto would be a model for the possibilities of life. Okay, I'll repeat that. A model for the possibilities of life. Now, the reason why I think that's what the Rosenwald schools and the Fairview Brown schools and others that grew out of this, as important as the Rosenwald schools were, they represented the priorities and dreams of local people. And many schools did the very same thing in the South. It deserved just as much significance and restoration value as a Rosenwald school, because this is where the best, in terms of what it means to be a faithful member of the human community, this is where the best learned their lessons and their training, together with their church, together with their community colleagues, together with their working together, and together with their struggles of life, because these were African Americans in a predominantly racist Southern society. And so one of the things that jumps out at me when I think about Fairview is that it is located in a part of Georgia that did not have as its model, positively or negatively, the plantation. This was Cherokee territory. Georgia didn't move into this territory until really the 1840s. This was Indian country. And that means that the first, that we were really pretty able to identify, first African-American settlers in this territory were probably already free. They were probably already liberated. We think, for example, of the Chubb family. This means that the origins of the spirit of the Fairview School are the origins of the spirit of liberty. And to be free and white in the South, okay. To be free and Black in the South, how do you do that? How do you preserve it? How do you create community solidarity? How do you generate respect for those who are not your color? And I think one of the great benefits of the Fairview School is it is the lessons. As I put it, it is a model for the possibilities of life. That you, I have to say this, that you and your colleagues have built and established this Fairview School, and this was recognized by the governor of Georgia. That you have been a part of constructing this school. You're keeping alive the stories of the past that we need to hear today.
Yeah, that's true.
These are not stories spread out on TV. These are not stories spread out on radio. This is not what we spend our time talking about when we've got a few minutes off during COVID to think about something else. No, it's living history. It's a part of who we are. It is the inspiration that we have in the work that we do in society, such as keeping the story alive. That's what I think the Fairview School represents. That's what I think Jeanne's work in the Rosenwald schools represent, which is telling the story of people who came before us, who had a vision for their community. And the vision that they had was mutual respect, dignity, trust, and learning. That is a universal story. And if we don't learn how to do those things, we won't survive as a community or as a nation. So I think what the Fairview School represents, what the Rosenwald schools represent, but also what all of the schools that were created through the hard efforts of African Americans and local communities who were up against a lot of resistance.
That's true.
In this state, that they pulled education off for themselves. And this is the heritage. This is the heritage that will save any society and any nation, is learning, compassion, self-respect, and honoring those who came before us, who brought us here and helped us learn what we needed to know to recover this school, which is the lessons of life that you've inherited. One last thing I'm going to say, and then I think that the location of this school in Georgia says something about the early effort in the African American community, and it precedes the Civil War. It precedes some of the early settlers who came to this part of the state, who were freed, their desire to succeed in life. So in a way, what we're suggesting is that the generations leading up to the founding of the Fairview School were generations that saw themselves as trying to create the best opportunities for those who would come after, and those are the children. Last, I want to say something about Jeanne Cyriaque. Jeanne has retired, as we know, and she's now living in Chicago. We got to get her back here to Georgia somehow. I'm so happy Jeanne participated today. She's a national leader in this conversation in the Rosenwald schools, the National Trust, and Jeanne have worked together for years. The State Historic Preservation Office here with Jeanne has worked together. We can't separate the success of the Southern regional effort to find the early origins of modern education in this community. We can't dismiss the work of Jeanne. She's gone, but she's still here.
She's still
Jeanne,
here.
thank you so much for participating in this call, and let's keep Jeanne a part of our Georgia conversation and our Southern conversation about the role of education in all of our communities.
That is so very true,
Thank you,
Jamil.
Jamil.
That is so very true. Jeanne has just been, like I said, wonderful to us in terms of developing this project, and we so appreciate her. And just to tag on to something that you said as well, those oral histories and documenting this information that from the alumni that we have now still here with us has been just a real huge effort. But we are planning to pull all of that together to be able to share, later on within the building. So we appreciate that. We appreciate that. Are there any other questions of the panelists? Jeannie, about the Rosenwald initiatives of the school educational opportunities in Georgia. Faye, about her personal experience and her personal testimony as to how she became the person that she became. And of course, Jamil, from the humanitarian aspect of how do we now move forward. If not, we're ready for a virtual tour. So let's take a short tour around the campus to see what all of the fuss is about on the Padlock Mountain Hill. John Ware, a dedicated board member for the last 6 years, put together a virtual tour of the campus. And with that, I'll turn it over to Swain to show that video.
On by the river in a little tent. Oh, just like that river, I've been running ever since.
During the years between 1912 and 1932, the collaboration of two men, Julius Rosenwald, then president of Sears Roebuck, and Booker T. Washington, then principal of the Tuskegee Institute, inspired a community-based movement that built over 5,300 schools and auxiliary buildings across 15 southern states. In 1924, this same dynamic of community action saw the construction of the Fairview Colored School on the terraces of Padlock Mountain Road. It was built with $900 in seed money from the Rosenwald Fund, combined with broad community support, and at a final cost of $4,100, a 3-teacher schoolhouse for African American children was constructed by the Floyd County Board of Education in Cave Spring. From 1925 to 1954, Fairview operated as the primary school for the African American children of the area, serving grades 1 through 11. The school closing in 1958 saw decades of it being used for a variety of purposes. Eventually, the property and buildings disintegrated into an unrecognizable mass of deteriorated wood covered in mounds of kudzu. Its rediscovery in 2009 sparked the passion of the Fairview alumni and the broader community to preserve the history and legacy of the Fairview School by rescuing and restoring the last remaining building. Fairview is one of a handful of remaining Rosenwald campuses out of the 259 schools built in Georgia between 1915 and 1937.
Hello and welcome to the Fairview Brown Historic Site. I'm Colonel John Ware, a member of the board of Fairview. We'd like to welcome you today to our tour. We have a piece of history that we are going to expose to you and show you. We think that you will enjoy what we're doing here and appreciate the importance of African American history and this part of African American history in our city and our state.
During its years of operation, hundreds of children walked and ran up the steep hill with enthusiasm and the expectation of learning something new.
The area that we're looking at here is planned to be used for parking for accessibility to the campus. We estimate that we will be able to accommodate 15 or 20 cars in this area, and perhaps a bus or two if we have school children come up. So this area was planned for that use. This particular area we intend to use as a welcome center for our campus site. We'll be able to accommodate several people and use this for a briefing center as they come to the site. We'll also have restrooms here for our visitors, and we'll have some accommodations for a few cars as we start the tour here. Where we are now is the site of the original Rosenwald building, which was built in 1924. As you can see, the chimney here is the last remaining vestige of that building, and the chimney provided ventilation and heating for the 2 or 3 classrooms that were located in this building.
The school was constructed using the 3-teacher community school to face north or south only, Plan 3B, provided by the Rosenwald Fund. This school building housed all grades from 1925 to 1945 when a second building was built. An archaeological study of the Fairview campus was conducted by archaeologists from the State of Georgia's Historic Preservation Division, led by Sarah Love. Interpretations and information from the Fairview campus work will be included in a soon-to-be-published book in July 2021.
This is the final set of steps leading up to the first grade building. If you can imagine 8-year-olds running up these steps every day, several times a day, going to their classrooms. Welcome to our award-winning first grade building. Let's go inside.
Come out the wilderness, come out the wilderness, come out the wilderness. How did you feel when you come out the wilderness, leaning on the Lord?
The first grade building was built in 1945 in the similar Rosenwald design of a north-facing schoolhouse. It has a classroom, a lunchroom, and a kitchen. It was built to accommodate the increase in the student body as a result of the closure of outlying community schools in Morton Bend, Livingston, Flat Rock, 6 Mile, and Chubtown.
This is a teacher's desk from one classroom like this, and this is one of the teachers, Mrs. Sams. Here in this case, we have a photograph of Julius Rosenwald. We've already talked about him and his significance to our project. We also have some other documents that were given by the city of Rome and other governments to the project, the restoration project that's going on here. Further down, we have some high school diplomas from some alumni of this organization. And we have some school registers and attendance records from 1945 era from this school. Here we have an example of a student's desk that is a replica of one that we found that was in this type of school building. What you see now here is a representation of from where we came from, that is a kudzu covered building that we discovered several years ago, to now the site that you are in, building that you're in, and what you see here now today. So we've come from there to the building that we've completed. This is the Fairview story. A great past shapes a greater future. This is kind of a representation of the community coming together for the great restoration work that has been done and the support of the entire community for that restoration. What you see here is alumni, community members, local dignitaries, and others who've come together to support the Fairview Round Project and continue to support it to this day.
Just as the community came together in 1924, the community once again rallied behind the Fairview effort. From bake sales to barbecues, from cookbooks to the classiest of galas, from in-kind to monetary, from company days sponsored by our corporate neighbors to every kind individual act and every ounce of volunteer energy, the community has brought the Fairview School back. Our community partners are numerous, beginning with our closest neighbor, the Cave Spring Masonic Lodge.
This is a representation of the Fairview School 2017-28 Challenge Pledge campaign, where we kicked off really taking the building from where you saw it initially to where you see it today. These are many of the contributors, and those contributions were led by Wes Rawraven.
The turning point for the rescue and restoration of the first grade building came when local businessman and philanthropist Wes Rawraven became Fairview's Challenge Pledge champion. His pledge matched the contribution of this list of over 200 supporters to raise the close to $200,000 needed to save the building and restore it to prominence while meeting historic preservation guidelines.
These are some of the teachers and principals of the school throughout the years.
Without question, the dedicated teachers of the Fairview School made all the difference in the world. They provided the nurture and encouragement, as well as the challenge to the children to do their best at all times.
What we have here is a depiction of some of our partners in our collaboration of education throughout the county. The Health and Holman Heritage Arts Incorporated, and also the Cave Spring Elementary School collaborated with us and students there to make some of these projects. The Stepping Stone project was really something that the alumni worked with the students of Cave Spring Elementary and making these stepping stones. They will be displayed, as will several others, on the campus when we open it finally.
Fairview and one of its programming partners, the Al Holman Heritage Arts, have collaborated to present cultural and arts programs over the years. This is consistent with Fairview's education mission and commitment to the community.
These are examples of things that students had to learn and recite during that period of time here. Their thought for the day was the motto of the school: good, better, best. I would not let it rest until my good is better and my better is best. These are examples of some of the principles that served Fairview over the years. We're now in the last room of this classroom building. This was the lunchroom, in fact. And these dresses and aprons are examples of what the cooks wore when they cooked for the students and the class every day.
As the community grew, so did the Fairview campus. The school consolidation into Fairview also boosted the student population.
In addition to the classrooms we've already seen, there were 2 additional classroom buildings on the terraces above. And above that was a playground where you would see hundreds of kids every day during recess.
2 new single classroom buildings built in 1947 housed the 2nd and 5th grades. They were also aligned to face north. After these were built, the Rosenwald building housed grades 3, 4, 6, and the high school. The playground was located on the very top terrace. The Fairview experience built strong minds and strong legs. The Fairview School has come a long way since 2009. From one of 10 historic sites listed as a place in peril by the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation.
There was a big hole in the roof and one wall was trying to fall out, and there was in danger of losing the entire building.
To a listing on the national as well as state of Georgia Registry of Historic Places, to a winner of multiple design and preservation awards. Full campus implementation will see a reinterpretation of the 1924 site to the garden shown here. Fairview had its first garden the Cornerstone Garden, dedicated in 2020, thanks to a gift from the Reeves family and Alan Reeves. Everything that you have seen thus far is a result of one woman's desire to know more about her father's professional life as an educator. When Joyce Purdue Smith began her research, little did she know how much rich history about the early 20th century living for African Americans in North Georgia she would uncover. Mr. Eugene Purdue served as one of Fairview's principals, along with Joyce's mother, who was a teacher at Fairview.
About 10 years ago, we began a trek to restore what we didn't know to be a national treasure.
The Fairview alumni could not imagine that the precious memories of their early 20th century education could inspire so many others in the 21st century. As Fairview continues to move forward with the full development of the Fairview School historic site, we invite you to continue the journey with us.
They want to hear the laughter of children on the hill again. And so I plan to do everything that I can to see that their dream comes true.
Seeing the restoration of this building brought back memories, and it reminded me that in the era in which I was growing up here, even though there was some limitation, but it did not deter us from wanting to get an education.
Thank you for visiting with us today. We hope the tour has been informative. We'd like to invite you to sign on to fairviewbrown.org to keep up with our progress.
Roll, Jordan, roll. Roll, Jordan. Roll, Jordan, roll. Roll, Jordan. I wanna go to heaven when I die. See old Jordan roll. And I say roll, Jordan, roll. Roll, Jordan. Roll, Jordan, roll. Roll, Jordan. I wanna go to heaven when I die.
Congratulations, Joyce.
That was excellent.
Congratulations.
That was excellent. That was excellent. Okay.
Congratulations, Joyce.
Oh, boy.
Congratulations to the Fairview team. I can't tell you how many people made that happen. When I look back through my records, there have been a ton of people who've just come forward out of the goodness of their heart to give what they could, and they gave their very best. And that's who we're here to talk about next, is one of those who has given the best that he could ever give, and that's Joe Smith, our architect. Well, Joe really needs no introduction. He is one of Georgia's architects extraordinaire. I met Joe at the 2011 announcement of the Georgia Trust Places in Peril. And despite being the most endangered looking peril in place on display, Joe walked over to me and he agreed to become the Fairview architect. He has led a most impressive effort of restoring the campus, guiding us through the particulars to make sure that we were first listed to the National Register. And he designed the restoration of the Fairview campus to include what we know as Historical Fairview and Greater Fairview. To his team, Joe has brought forth a landscape architect and archaeologist to help us complete the dream. I turn the floor over now to Joe, our architect.
Thanks, Joyce. It was great to see that film and to remember all that's gone into where we are right now. And what I wanted to do today was really give everyone an idea of what the plans for the future are, because we're certainly not resting on our laurels with what we've done so far. And it's important that Fairview continues to grow and evolve, and the mission of Fairview continues to grow and evolve as well. So I'll share some imagery of that. All right. The first grade classroom building, as was previously mentioned, was the recipient of two pretty prestigious awards in the state, one from the Georgia Trust, an Excellence in Restoration Award, and then Also, the AIA Georgia, which is an architects organization, gave the school an award for design, which was pretty nice feather in the cap as well. It's nice to see preservation projects recognized by architects who often don't focus on that area as much. So I was pleased to see that happen. But the school sits now proudly, the first grade building at least sits proudly on the hill, awaiting its compatriots around it to be brought back to life. So there's a little bit left to do with first grade building. It really has to do with accessibility. As you saw in the photos, not all those alumni of the Fairview School are spry chickens these days. And so accessibility to the site and accessibility to the building is a significant aspect of consideration for what happens in the future. And so there are some practical considerations in addition to aspirational considerations for what happens with both the existing infrastructure at Fairview and the future infrastructure at Fairview. Historically, there was a porch. There were porches at both ends of the building, a large porch on the north side, which you can see at the left of the image on the screen. And that porch will be rebuilt. And in addition to that, ramps, accessibility so that anyone who's in a wheelchair could access the building will be part of that reconstruction project. So we're looking at site access and building, in particular, building access for the school. Another component is site access. As you've seen from the photographs, as John Ware was huffing it up the hill, Fairview was built on a relatively steep site. It's a former agricultural site. It's terraced because the topography of that part of Floyd County and of Cave Spring is quite steep and hilly. So each one of the buildings historically was built on a different terrace, and there's 10 to 12 feet of difference between each one of those elevations. And so what the layout of the campus is unique in that regard because it has to conform to that old agricultural terracing. If you think about how you get a school bus uphill like that, it's kind of tricky. And that's one of the missions of the greater Fairview idea, is that there will be educational programs that are instrumental or in the program for the way that the school campus is used. And to get a school bus up a hill, a steep hill, is a tough call. And so we've been planning some alternate routing, which involves accessing the property from a different place that would make it a less steep route as part of that plan. And so rather than coming off of Padlock Mountain Road directly, we have an alternate route that would bring you up to the parking lot. And then if you wanted to go up to the school building, you could go up a little farther and actually park, and there would be some handicap spaces higher up on the hill. The Rosenwald site is a significant archaeological resource. Even though the building is no longer extant, as John showed in the video, there is an existing chimney. And in fact, in our archaeological investigations of the site, we discovered essentially all of the foundation piers are there at the surface of the ground and down. And so the footprint of the building is easily traceable on the surface of the ground. That's significant. And then within the dirt, there are artifacts that we were finding very, very shallow because of the way that the building was deconstructed at some point in the past. And so there are fragments of the history of the building, this recent past archaeology, which is an incredibly interesting avenue of investigation. That's significant to the National Register status of the site as a whole. And so it's important that whatever we do to this site, to the Rosenwald site, doesn't really disturb what's there. And so what we thought of was this idea that the footprint of the building, of this 3-teacher classroom building, could in some ways inform a future use of the site, which would be a community garden, relatively low impact, and a community garden in which the beds were arranged and the different planting areas were arranged to reflect the classroom layouts of the building that formerly was on the site. And because of the position of the foundation piers and the chimney piers and all of those elements, you could use those without disturbing them. You could build over them, and you could have this use, which both interprets the form of the original building without actually disturbing it, to give any visitor a sense of what that building was at the time. In addition, there's a non-historic shed building on a lower terrace, which is useful, but not that useful for the way that the campus needs to be used. And so the plan is to replace that building with a new visitor center building, which has both restroom facilities, which are currently lacking on the campus, and also an assembly space, which would allow a busload of kids to come in and be introduced to the Fairview story before they proceed up the hill to the garden and to the first grade building. And that building, in order not to compete with the architecture or the historic appearance of what is at Fairview, we're thinking that this old community store model of a long, narrow building, which fits the terrace, the narrow terrace that it would sit on, it fits it very well, that a kind of modernized version of this form would be a really nice way to treat that building, so that it was both contextual to what's there historically, but not necessarily competing with it, and certainly not trying to appear as though it were a historic building. But we like this form. It's a familiar form, and it's also one that seems related in some way to the architecture of what's on the campus now. And then finally, in a bigger sense, what does Fairview become? What is the significance of the Fairview campus when it's fully restored and operating? And the thing that has really developed over the last 10 years that I've been involved in the project, and also on a side project as a member of the Georgia National Register Review Board for the last 4 years, is that African-American sites that are nominated to the National Register in Georgia are frequently one part of it's one leg of a tripod of historic resources. In a lot of African-American communities, I've learned that it wasn't just a school building or a church building or a lodge hall building. It was there was a relationship between the three of these types of buildings, and that they were often located adjacent to each other. And that these were sort of the three legs of the community: the church, the lodge hall, the school, were the significant elements of the community. And we actually have that at Fairview. The Lodge Hall is just down the hill, and New Hope Baptist Church is just down the hill as well, and right on Padlock Mountain Road. And then surrounding these three buildings were multiple small residential buildings, some of which are still in existence. And so when the nomination for Fairview was the nomination to the National Register for Fairview was being put forward, it was a site-wide nomination. And I really see now, sort of from the perspective of coming off the board this year, that there's a real opportunity, I think here, to expand the significance of the site, to incorporate both the Lodge Hall site, which dates all the way back to the early 20th century. Even the Lodge Hall predates, both the church and the Lodge Hall predate Fairview by 20 or more years. But those three and the residential buildings, I think they have a really good opportunity. There's a great opportunity here to both recognize the relationship between those elements, but also to make them all potentially eligible for preservation grants or funding, which is the same way that Fairview got a lot of the money that was put into the restoration. So I think from a preservation goal, which is sort of my perspective, I think there's a really exciting possibility to expand the mission of Fairview, not just to deal with Fairview itself, but also to draw attention to the larger community that exists, the African-American community that existed on Padlock Mountain Road, and goes all the way back into the 19th century as well, because although I've not mentioned it, there are other elements of institutional elements that were in existence in that area even before that. So very exciting. And I'm looking forward to what happens in the next 10 years. Done a lot of great things in the last 10 years. And I hope that if we have a discussion like this in 2032, whatever year that would be, that we're talking about this greater Fairview having come to fruition. So I'm looking forward to it. So thanks, Joyce.
Thank you, Joe. That
Sure.
was excellent. The overall theme of where we're headed was good to share. Okay, so last but not least, I'd like to introduce the voice you've heard since the very beginning. That would be Swain Waters, our development officer. Swain has been a part of the project for several years and has supported us in many sundry ways. He's been inside the workplace. In fact, professionally, he worked and held a distinguished career at AT&T and other places around the country. We're very proud to have Swain on board because he's given us an opportunity to expand our reach and our importance and share our importance to the community. I would tell you that Swain has a real investment in the campus, and that is he had 11 aunts and uncles to attend Fairview, which would include his father. And so his dedication is expressed through all of the work that he does to support the particular project. At this point, Swain, is anybody called in for the chat before we move into your presentation?
I'm sorry, no questions. No, we haven't received any.
Okay, no questions. Great. Okay, great. Okay. So at this point in time, are there any other questions or things that we can clarify for the panel at hand? Swain, did you have anything that you wanted to share in terms of how people can support us? I can hear you.
Okay, you should hear me now.
I do.
All right. Just want to thank everyone for being here. And the biggest question I could answer this afternoon would be why. And that why has been articulated very well by everyone that has preceded me, from it being a cornerstone for possibilities, reason to preserve history, promote legacy, to promote goodwill, to expand a community, and more importantly, the thing I like to always remind people that Fairview has remained impactful in the community since its rediscovery in 2009 from programming that has taken place. And I just like to emphasize that Fairview is indeed bigger than the one building. It is as big or bigger as the picture that Joe just painted about the greater Fairview, because the memories of the alumni really involve a community that was engaged in the education of all of its children. Presently, folks can visit our website at fairviewbrown.org and click on the donate button and go from there. We also are in the midst of a crowdfunding campaign, as Joe talked about, completing the accessibility portion for the porches, ramps, and walkways. We do have some cost increase, as everyone has heard on the news, with materials and so forth. So in order to close that gap, we have a $27,000 crowdfunding campaign underway. I'd encourage everyone to share that with as many people as possible. And if they just go to the website, fairviewbrown.org, they can donate whichever way pleases them best. They can donate and be a part of the crowdfunding campaign, as well as they can be a general contributor to the Fairview Brown effort. And so with that, I will simply say thanks to everyone who continues to support Fairview with blood, sweat, and tears, and all the spare funding that they can send our way.
Thank you, Swain. Thank you much. So I would like to thank you all for attending our Zoom session today, our presentation regarding the school itself and our plans for the future. I'd especially like to thank our esteemed panelists, Jeanne, Jamil, and Faye, for their insight, guidance, and experience. John Ware for the campus tour. Joe Smith, our architect, for his specialized knowledge and forward thinking. And Swain for being our development officer, but he also has and is a jack of all trades and always has led us in the right direction. Our back office volunteers and friends whom you don't see today have also been very important and instrumental in getting us to this point, and they too work tirelessly to bring the Fairview mission into fruition. And finally, I want to thank all of you that have attended today for your continued support of the Fairview Project. Continue to follow our progress on our website and share our YouTube videos. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye, everyone.
Can I say something before we go?
Sure.
Can I say something before we go? I think Joe, your presentation was mind-blowing. I have to tell you, the way you put the entire community together graphically.
Correct.
And the structures are there or they are outlined. That's really beautifully done. And I think anybody who sees that, and Swain's presentation, you know, his words are so important as well. Anybody who sees that gets it. And
Absolutely.
I can't think of another time when we are so disengaged, so disconnected. I don't want to put negativity on that, but there was a lot of strength that came from the community that was outlined and the structures that you recreated. One of the challenges that you created from what is there, one of the challenges for us in the future is, how do we hold that community together? We don't have the answer, but we need to know what happened, what worked before, and how do we do that in the future? And I think that is a model. That is a model. And so I want to congratulate you for putting that together. I think anybody who sees that gets it. I really,
Absolutely.
Well done.
Thank you. Thanks.
That is so true. And we've been looking forward to Greater Fairview for a while now.
Yeah.
So now it's just a matter of pulling the money together. Everyone did an excellent. Go ahead, Jeanne.
I too would really like to congratulate the rest of the panel for seeing that the Fairview story is one of great importance right now, today. And Joe, thank you for talking about the significance of this site, not only from a historic preservation standpoint, but also from an archaeological site.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Faye, I would like to also thank you as well as Jamil, because you captured what is involved in the storytelling part of this. And it gives inspiration to all for the future of this site as well as others. Swain, I'd like to thank you as well for talking about the role of fundraising. And I would also like to conclude with the role of this site in the broader context of heritage tourism.
That's true.
When people come to Cave Spring, they're not only seeing this wonderful site, but they also see places like the Georgia School for the Deaf.
Oh, yes.
Good point.
Which, you know, today is a rarity in Georgia.
It is.
Because most deaf children now go to other types of schools, some of which are in Atlanta. And to see that campus again and visit even on the outskirts of town, you cannot get into the Georgia School for the Deaf today because it is a rural community. So I think we really have to look at this in a much broader context, as well as those that have been mentioned before. It is a true Georgia gem.
It is. It is.
You know?
It is. It is. It is.
And worth a drive for many people as far away as Atlanta, because plan on spending the day in Cave Spring.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Drink some spring water.
And bring some water, right? And drink some water.
Right.
Because there's much to see there. And I encourage all people to come to Cave Spring on a weekend and really enjoy the rural atmosphere. You might even catch a restaurant that's open.
Right.
As Jamil pointed out, it's part of the Trail of Tears. So look for things beyond what you see on the Fairview campus, but certainly include that as well.
Oh, Jeanne, thanks so much for your insight. Thanks
You
so
bet.
much for your insight. Well, guys, we've done it again. I thought it was an excellent program. I think we owe ourselves a round of applause. It was great. I was about to say, I think I have this great way of picking up people once they retire. I said, Joe, you're not retired. But Swain and Faye, Jeanne, Jamil, y'all are all retired. And just in the nick of time, somehow I got to you guys and you said yes. So thank you so much for your participation. And Jamil, actually, I think this gives you the oversight that you have been looking for, you know, in terms of what was Fairview all about and where were we going. And so I think the video that was done of the campus, John Ware did an excellent job, and
really good.
Swain and pulling that together. I think you got what you needed. You don't need to take that 140-mile trip.
Yeah, I think it's terrific. I really do.
Yep, you got it. You got it.
You got it. We got it.
Okay. Anything else? If not, I'll say good afternoon. Y'all have a great and blessed afternoon, and we will talk soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank